And now to deliver our keynote speech. Are you ready? I know you just sat down, but now you have to get back up again. The chief scientist for Lumir Lab and Asano Bio Group, the keynote speaker. Please put your hands together and welcome Dr. Lumir Hanuš.
Good morning. My name is Lumir Hanuš. I work with cannabis from 1970. I worked 20 years at the medical faculty of Palacký University in Olomouc, Czechoslovakia. All the time in hospital, we treated patients with cannabis. It was from 1955 to 1990. And that year, 1990, Professor Meshulam invited me for 1 year to Jerusalem for research. It's 33 years ago. It will be in several days, exactly 33 days. And it was more or less successful, and so I stayed another year, and it's 33 years. But during that time, I also was several times at National Institute of Health in Bethesda, Maryland. And I was an NIDDK. It was kidney, yes, and research, and NIAAA, National Institute of Alcohol Abuse and Alcoholism. And over there, I did research of hibernation of ground squirrels. And we studied concentrations of endocannabinoids during hibernation of this ground squirrel, because as you can see later, it's very important for certain human problems which can be treated because they are influenced by endocannabinoids, and if they are influenced by endocannabinoids, it means that they will be also influenced by cannabinoids. You know, concerning sleeping, it can be estivation during summer that animals want to protect from dry season. But we talk about hibernation, it's more interesting because it's in the winter, when it's short day, it's low temperatures and it's not enough food. So animals enter a stage which they call hibernation. And also it's a lot dark and it's quiet because nature is quiet, and it's very important for hibernation. Concerning hibernation, so through hibernators, over there are written marmots, ground squirrels, hedgehogs, and other animals. And they enter this stage because it's not enough food. So during summer, they eat a lot of food to be fatty, and this fat later during hibernation, they use like source of food for their body, and at the same time, it's also protection, this fat, against cold. When they hibernate from time to time, they awake just to check themselves if there are not some parasites. Sometimes they want to eliminate some waste from the body. And sometimes they won't eat, like, you know, the squirrels, they collect food for winter. So also very interesting is black bear in America. It's not exact hibernator because drop of temperature is about only between 5 and 6 degrees, but these bears, they sleep almost 6 months. And during this, what is surprising, that there is no increase of porosity of their bones. And also, they don't use any water, and they don't have any kidney problems because urea, when accumulates, so it can be toxic. but they can work up it to other compounds used to nitrogen for proteins and so on. So scientists studied such bears. It's complicated because when they sleep, they can awake when you touch them. So it's a special method how to prepare them. And they found that these bears can survive without any problem, and it can help if it solve this problem, how they do it, help to people which has chronic kidney failure. So they can be treated. And they check also bones, tibia, its lower part of the leg bone, and they saw that 9 months old grizzly and 6 months later, there was no increase in porosity. So hibernation protect them because all metabolic processes goes down up to 98%. Concerning these bones, so it's about 19 years ago, they brought me bones from mice and wanted, this was tibia. This is the bone which they use from bears to check porosity, and femur. And they told me check if there are some endocannabinoids. So I analyzed it and I found that there is a very small peak, as you can see, almost invisible. It's in green. So I analyzed this peak and we had spectrum just to, it didn't run in GC, so we prepare a silated derivative. And it ran very nice, and we found that this is silated 2-AG, 2-arachidonyl glycerol. This was second endocannabinoid which was discovered, this isolated Professor Shimon Ben Shabbat at Professor Meshulam laboratory. I also participated, but I did binding studies because at that time Dr. Bill Devane already wasn't over there. So he taught me how to do it, so I did binding studies. And that 2-AG stimulates bones to be stronger. It was proved, and there is also patent from Professor Bab and Meshulam that when they use 2-AG with animals, so as you can see, bones were stronger, there was less porosity. So this is very important 2-AG endocannabinoid, which can protect not only animals, but also it must be worked up, also it will be very useful for human being. And endocannabinoids, you know, concerning bones, because there are osteoclasts and osteoblasts. These are cells which decompose bones and build bones. So this we call bone remodeling, and it goes all the time. So bones which you have before are not the same bones. You have just all new bone cells. And these endocannabinoids, this already know everybody that CB1 is in reproductive system and brain, and in bones CB2 because it's in immune system. And back to the hibernating animals, what is very interesting that they drop breath. If they breathe 200 times per minute, it drops 100 times to 2 breaths per minute. And heartbeat from 200, it drops just only 2 beats per minute. So it's important that here is hypothermia. Temperature goes really strongly down, and it protects, and also all metabolic processes goes up to 98% down. As you can see, marmots This is probably also here in the mountains in Slovenia, I think, at least in Slovakia, we can see them. So the temperature of the body drops from 31 to only 5.6. And respiration, what I said, respiration drops down 25 times. And heartbeat drops down 25 times. And also brain activity drops down about 90%. But the world champion between hibernators are Arctic grand squirrels. Temperature of the body, it's unbelievable, decrease from 37 to minus 3.1. Minus 3.1, it's like frozen meat, yes? But nothing happened. They survive without any problem. And after hibernation state, they are again okay. And solve all these secrets of hibernation can help solve some life-threatening situations at a human being. But to understand hibernation, they hibernate 6 months, but it's impossible 6 months because they can die. So each 2 weeks, temperature goes up, extreme energy, and they stay about 1 day on the top, and then they again hibernate. And during this 1 day, they check if they don't have parasites. Eventually, they eat or they eliminate waste from the body. And it's repeated regularly up to the end of hibernation. And you see down these dots, this is temperature of the soil. So if they stay somewhere, so they are sleeping, in fact, at minus 10, without any blanket, anything, so they can survive. So this is 1 day when temperature goes up and again down. And these are ground squirrels, what we studied. These are, again, animals which can hibernate about half a year. And during hibernation, again, goes down as heartbeat, as frequency of breath, and metabolic rate also decrease, and cold and dark, everything together help them survive. You know, and these pictures, these are 13 ground squirrels, and this is like human, in the fact when we look on the situation which is in the body of this squirrel, it's like human which suffer a stroke. But they have no problem, and what they found, that blood doesn't clot, that there is rich of ascorbic acid blood, what can be interesting for human being, and other white cells are going to hiding for that time. So everything helps them survive cold. And if a human could hibernate, so body temperature should drop to 5 degrees, as you can see, heartbeat 3 per minute, and breathing 1 per 4 minutes. So it's impossible, but we can learn it and use it by different way to help human beings. Now, concerning our study at National Institute of Health, we studied brain parts of hibernating, non-hibernating, and regular squirrels. Non-hibernating, this was at 4 degrees centigrade, and regular, this was at room temperature. They are very, very wild, so we need special gloves because they can bite you. But as soon as they we studied several endogenous compounds, anandamide, noladin ether, 2-AG, oleamide, oleoyl ethanolamide. This deuterated anandamide, this was like standard. And when hibernate, this ground squirrel, because it's cold, 4 degrees, so they are like from a refrigerator. So they are like ball, and when you catch them, they cannot protect themselves. So sometimes happens that some wild animals find them underground and eat them because they cannot protect themselves. If I keep it 1 hour in my hand, then open slowly one eye, and it takes about 3 hours to be okay. So we studied several parts of brains. This was especially Professor Palkovic from Hungary, which separated for us this part of brains every time on the spot at NIH. And this was cerebellum, limbic forebrain, amygdala, hippocampus, and hypothalamus. And to the results, the most interesting was 2-AG. This looks that this is very important endocannabinoid. And as you can see, RT is room temperature, 4DC is 4 degrees, and HIB is hibernating. They were in cage at 4 degrees, but not all start to hibernate. Some of them stay regularly, but at 4 degrees. But even this cold influence amounts of their endocannabinoids. As you can see, 2-AG in comparison with room temperature and with 4 degrees. I shall talk about like 4 degrees, it means which live at the temperature 4 degrees. It was significantly different in cerebellum. Similar, it was also in limbic forebrain. It was not like cerebellum, but still it was significant for 3 stars, limbic forebrain. And then we studied also 2-AG in amygdala. In amygdala, still you can see that significantly higher concentrations of 2-AG were at hibernating squirrels. From other compounds, we studied oleoethanolamide. In cerebellum, you can see that at squirrels at 4 degrees and hibernating, it increased significantly in comparison with room temperature. And the last compound, all endocannabinoids which we studied, there were differences, but I'm talking about these which were the most significant. And oleamide, this is called sometimes sleeping factor. In limbic forebrain, you can see that increased significantly when they were at 4 degrees and also at hibernating. And we studied also oleamide in all compounds, but oleamide in plasma was the most important. And in comparison with regular squirrels at room temperature, you see that this oleamide significantly increased. So probably these are the most important endocannabinoids which protect with other protection factors, of course, these ground squirrels to survive. Our interest was also concerning some compound which we would like to call a hibernator. So we try to find which compound has highest changes, and this is part of chromatogram, and we found that this compound, which is in blue, that significantly decreased. So we try to identify this compound, and on the left is noladin ether. This is one of endocannabinoids which we isolated at Hebrew University. So we tentatively identify this compound like homogamma linoleal glycerol. There is one double bond less. Otherwise, it's the same as noladin ether. Unfortunately, we didn't have somebody who can synthesize this for us. to prove that it fits 100%, because only analysis and spectra, it's nice, but we like every time prove it with a real compound. So what is the result from this our studies? You know, if we understand molecular mechanism of bone mass maintenance in bears, so it can lead to prevent osteoporosis at chronically hospitalized patients, because they stay in the bed, so that it goes very fast, osteoporosis. And this information that kidney drops, urine in kidney drops by 95%, so it can be very important to treat people suffering from chronic kidney failure. And understanding how body temperatures are tolerated by squalls may facilitate that organs for transplantation we can store more time, because sometimes it's for long distance, so it's a long time, so it can be safer. And molecular mechanism of tolerance of blood flow, because its blood flow is very low, so it can also give us hints for treatment of ischemia. And then during hibernation, blood flow, as I said, drops down up to 98% for several weeks. And identification of this molecular mechanism can again help us protect from injury due to stroke or heart attack. So these are very important things, and I would like to tell you, it will be at the end, what I wanted now. So extreme survival, these are tricks of hibernation of animals and occasionally human, as I show you directly. And it can overcome life-threatening injuries. That human body also can fight against cold like animals. I show you 3 unbelievable examples. There is more, but I choose 3. In Norway, one radiologist, she did cross-country with friends, and when they were crossing the river, so breaks ice, and she fall exactly was as you can see. They couldn't take her up, because also they can be under ice. So she found some air bubble and was fighting 4 minutes for life. Then she finished, and she was more than an hour in this icy water. No breath, no heartbeat, more than an hour, and her body temperature that they brought you was only 13.7 degrees. She survived. They treated her, and they hit slowly blood outside. They took it outside and back, and she survived. In Canada, at 2 at night, I woke a small girl, and accidentally she opened the door and went outside to snow. There was minus 20 degrees. Parents found her, and she was more than an hour already without breath, without heartbeat, and had 21 degrees. They took her to hospital, and the next day, they treated her. Next day, she was okay. And this is very interesting, this hibernating man. One man went from France, from region where usually are not people. He fell and broke his pelvis. And he couldn't move, so stayed 1 day, and then he lost consciousness. And they found him after 24 days. There was temperature 10 degrees. He was without food, without water, had no pulse almost, organs had almost shut down, and body temperature was only 22 degrees. They took him to hospital. He survived without any problems after that. So human body has possibilities, but we must study it and find these possibilities concerning hibernation, what really can help in treatment. And Professor Meshulam, which unfortunately deceased, in January we celebrated his 92, and he was perfect. And then he became sick, and in 6 weeks he died. So he said that there is almost any physiological process which is influencing the body by endocannabinoids. And he said that whatever THC does, anandamide also. So I can only add that cannabinoids can do whatever endocannabinoids do. And in the fact, cannabinoids, they mimic endocannabinoids. So if we can see that during this hibernation, examples of life-threatening situations which can be treated at humans, that we should study it. I know only another one publication appeared after us, which studied these endocannabinoids concerning hibernation. So it can really help humans to treat these serious problems. Thank you very much for your attention.
Dr. Hanuš, we may have time for a few questions. Does anybody have a question? There's a question right here. Here, yeah.
Hello, Roman from the Faculty of Health Sciences. I would just like to maybe, if you give us a follow-up, you show that you found the molecule which is responsible for hibernating. And you said that nobody isolated. Do you have any follow-up, any progress on that specific molecule?
On this specific molecule, I don't have progress because when I finished at NIH, so we didn't have anybody to synthesize it. So I was forced to return because we had a project in Jerusalem, so I couldn't stay longer. I returned again for months, and we studied it, so we came to decision that this is the compound which I showed you.
So we have to look into it if somebody else did it and something. Okay,
so
thank you.
It's still opened. But probably it's this compound, and so it will be probably also endocannabinoid.
Are there more questions?
Here.
Oh, over here. I'm closer, so.
Well, thank you for this wonderful presentation. Do you have any idea or hypothesis of what the anandamide does? What is its function in the hibernation, because it was so much increased?
Mm-hmm. You know, anandamide is very interesting compound. It's not the best compound from endocannabinoids. I isolated even more active compound, but because anandamide was the first one, so it's such studied, you know. This is like active was THC, so everybody studied THC, and here was anandamide, so everybody studied anandamide. And then they studied 2AG, why 2HD, and not tetraenyl ethanolamide, which I isolated and which was more active, because 2AG is different chemistry, because one time it's amide, one time it's ester. So that is why they wanted to study different chemical nature of the compound. That is why these two compounds are mostly studied. And we thought that the main function in organism is protect humans from stress. Why we name it anandamide? There are two reasons. Ananda is bliss delight, and Dr. William Devane studied Eastern philosophy, and they found that in Sanskrit Ananda is bliss delight, so he wanted to name it Anandadine. When you isolate it, we shall call it Anandadine, he said, because he was a specialist in molecular pharmacology, And all my isolates, he tested for activity. So we did it together because one without the other one couldn't do it. So it was perfect cooperation. And when we identified it, Professor Meshulam said, but chemical nature also. And it was arachidonyl ethanol amide. So this was ananda, this was amide, so this was anandamide. And why bliss delight? Because it should express happiness of discoverers and expected effect. That is in organism compound which makes you happy or which beats your stress.
It's a stress.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. So you're saying that weed makes you happy, which is great. Are there any more questions? There. Noah's going to come over. This is Noah. Let's hear it for Noah, everybody. He's helping. He's got the nice shoes.
Hello. Fascinating presentation. So curious, so the final closing statements of endocannabinoids and cannabinoids having a high crossover effect. What is your proposed study, how we can start seeing the effects of cannabinoids and endocannabinoid systems, since, like you said, everyone jumped on THC because it was the first. There's so many potential subcompounds to study. What's the framework that you're looking at? Does that exist? Does that need to be done? What's the future look like in this space?
You know, in the fact, when I was forced to enter pension, because you can work in Israel only to age 68, so I work at the university at 69. You are head of department, what I wasn't. You can stay for good, up to death, yes. So I finished at 69 and I came to the company which wanted to treat endometriosis with cannabis. So we studied endometriosis. It's really very interesting because about between 10 and 11% women in productive age has endometriosis. Some of them don't know that it's endometriosis because it can take longer time to find that this disease is endometriosis, and probably I am not going to talk about that because you probably know all these signs from which we understand it. So in Israel, I know one physician, he treated with cannabis several women with endometriosis and he was successful. So this is field which is very interesting. Unfortunately, this company, as we say, coronavirus ate them. So this laboratory doesn't continue because they didn't have money because of Corona. So this, at the moment, it's in the ice. It's waiting to continue when will be more favorable situation. They also moved from Jerusalem. It was very complicated to travel. Travel every day 3 hours to the lab. It's too much. So what happened? This happened. And the study of cannabinoids, of course, the most interesting study should be real cannabinoids. It means real cannabinoids are acids, cannabinoid acids, of course. And they studied the carboxylates. And the carboxylates of these real acids are 4: cannabigerolic, cannabichromenic, tetrahydrocannabinolic, and cannabidiolic. And also cannabigerol, cannabidiol, tetrahydrocannabinol, and cannabichromene. So these are the main compounds which are studied because they are in highest concentrations. And sometime we must find how to give it to the patient, because if you imagine that concentrations of anandamide, if I knew that I never start to isolate it, that concentrations are nanograms per gram, what is nothing. It was no, when I isolated for the first time and I evaporated it, so glass tube was clean. There was nothing. When I dissolved this nothing and we built and tested it, so it was active. Yeah, so it's very low concentrations, and with our effort at the end we have 0.5 milligram. It was enough for identification. 0.5 milligram. It was a huge amount when you imagine. So probably cannabinoids, when they are used, so also very small amounts in the fact are used by the body. Everything is lost because sometimes people use grams of cannabinoids and so on. Yes, so it's still, even when now 1,000 publications, I cannot check everything. Before I sent snail mail and I had all reprints. Today it's impossible, even you cannot download all papers. Every week is between 100 and 300 papers on cannabinoids and endocannabinoids. So if you rest 1 month, so then you have almost 2,000 papers sometimes. So it takes me 2 days. I just only go through these papers and to find what is important. So of course it must be studied because cannabinoids mimic endocannabinoids, and not everybody of us has endocannabinoid system enough strong to beat diseases. Somebody has disease, but endocannabinoid system fast returns to homeostasis, then is balanced in organisms and you are healthy. And sometimes organism is not enough strong, so you must use cannabinoids to help to the person. So, and there is so many diseases that discuss it is not such easy. And why is so many diseases which can be treated? Because endocannabinoid system and cannabinoid receptors are one of the most spread receptors in human body. You can find it almost anywhere. That is why it works with so many diseases.
Thank you so very much. One more time, Dr. Hanuš. He does make a good point. Like, we're just starting to really understand all of the compounds and the chemicals and the terpenes and the essences and the CBD and the CBG and the CBN and THC and the THCA and the THCV and the Rama Lama Ding Dong and the supercalifragilisticexpialidocious. There's so many different chemicals, and we've never really studied the cannabis plant for a long time. We weren't allowed to. So I'm very happy that everyone is here to study more, and it's going to be years, and we're going to learn new things all the time. It's going to be great. Yeah.
Just pick up the floods for people to donate to.
Yeah, don't forget, we're going to donate to the floods. Thanks, Alex. Let's hear it for Alex Rogers, everybody. I'm like,
we're matching up to €1,000.
you hear that? The ICBC is going to match up to €1,000. So there you go. That's a good deal. All right? So everybody here put in €10. But we'll do that in a minute.